It was one of those evenings when the city lights made everything look richer than it was. The party was being held at one of the grand hotels near the river, where the air smelled of expensive perfume, and laughter echoed off the marble walls. People were arriving in shiny cars, dressed in clothes that probably cost more than a month's rent. Among the guests walked a man who didn't quite fit in. His name was Ravi. He was a mechanic, known in his small neighborhood garage for fixing cars that others had given up on. His hands were rough from years of work, and tiny scars told the story of long days spent under greasy engines. Tonight he wore his best shirt, clean but old, and a pair of shoes he had polished until they shone. He had never been to a party like this before. Ravi had been invited by one of his regular customers, a rich businessman named Mr. Verma. A few days earlier, Ravi had repaired his luxury car after a complicated engine issue. Mr. Verma, pleased with the result, had casually said, "You should come to my birthday party this weekend. It'll be fun." Ravi had smiled politely, thinking the invitation was just a formality. But to his surprise, the man had insisted, "No, really. You've done good work. Come. You'll meet some interesting people." So here he was, standing awkwardly near the entrance, holding the small bouquet he had bought from a roadside shop on his way. The doorman gave him a quick look, the kind that scanned and silently judged, before letting him in. Inside, everything glittered. Chandeliers sparkled overhead. Music played softly, and waiters moved around carrying trays of drinks and appetizers. Ravi felt his throat dry up. He had imagined a friendly gathering, maybe a few laughs and food, but this was a world he had only seen from afar. Still, he tried to blend in. He smiled politely at strangers, nodded at anyone who looked his way, and found a quiet corner to stand in. He placed the bouquet on a side table, hoping to give it to Mr. Verma later. After a few minutes, he spotted the man himself, Mr. Verma, laughing loudly in a group surrounded by other well-dressed guests. When he noticed Ravi, he waved casually. "Ah, there he is." "My mechanic." The way he said it made a few heads turn. Some people smiled faintly, others chuckled. Ravi felt a warm flush on his cheeks, but he smiled and walked over. "Sir, happy birthday," he said, offering the bouquet. Mr. Verma took it with a half smile, looking a little amused. Thank you. You really didn't have to." Then turning to his friends, he added with a laugh, "See, I told you. Even my mechanic remembers me." The group laughed politely. Ravi stood there, unsure how to react. One of the women in a glittering gown said jokingly, "That's so sweet. You have loyal fans in every class, Verma." Ravi tried to smile, but the words stung. Mr. Verma motioned for Ravi to join them. "Come, have a drink." "You should relax a bit. You work too hard." A waiter offered him a glass, and Ravi hesitated, feeling out of place among the confident, polished people around him. Someone whispered loudly enough for him to hear, "Careful, he might spill oil on the carpet." Laughter followed. Ravi forced a smile. He didn't want to cause a scene. He kept quiet, sipping his drink slowly, pretending not to notice the glances and murmurs. They talked about business deals, vacations abroad, and expensive hobbies. Someone asked him what he did exactly. "I fix cars," Ravi said simply. That was all it took. One man with slicked back hair laughed. "Ah, that explains the strong handshake. Must come from tightening bolts all day." Another added, "You must be doing well then. People can't live without cars." Their tone was mocking, not friendly. Ravi tried to stay polite. "It's honest work, sir." "I'm grateful for it," Mr. Verma chuckled. "He's one of the best mechanics around. I had a problem with my BMW last week, and he fixed it in no time." For a brief moment, Ravi felt proud. But then someone said, "Maybe he should start a class here. We could learn how to change our own tires." The laughter grew louder this time. Ravi smiled weakly. His hands fidgeted with the edge of his glass. He wished he could disappear. A few minutes later, as the music changed, Mr. Verma excused himself to greet other guests, leaving Ravi alone with a few strangers. They continued chatting about things Ravi didn't understand. Share markets, property investments, international travel. Whenever he tried to contribute, the conversation quickly moved past him. He found himself standing again in a corner, staring at the shining floor. A waiter offered him another drink, but he declined. He was already feeling a knot in his chest. Across the room, someone called out, "Hey, where's that mechanic friend of yours, Verma? Maybe he can check the sound system. It's making some noise." Another wave of laughter. Ravi pretended not to hear. He walked out onto the balcony where the cool evening air felt kinder. From there, he could see the city lights stretching far and wide. He thought about his small garage, his 2 assistants waiting for their weekly pay, and the customers who trusted him. Out there, he was respected. In here, he was invisible, or worse, a joke. Still, he didn't hate them. He just felt small, smaller than he had in years. He thought of leaving right away, but he didn't want to seem rude. He waited for the right moment, standing quietly until the crowd's laughter grew distant. Inside, the music had picked up again. People were dancing, and no one seemed to notice that the mechanic had stepped out. He pulled out his phone, checking the time. It was almost 10. His mother would still be awake, waiting to hear how the party went. He imagined her face lighting up, asking, "Did they treat you well, Beta?" And he didn't know how he would answer. A gentle breeze brushed his face. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He told himself not to let this night break him. After all, he had seen worse. He had worked days without food, fixed cars in the rain, slept in the garage during hard times. This humiliation, was nothing compared to the struggles he had already survived. A few moments later, Mr. Verma came to the balcony, half drunk and smiling. "There you are. Enjoying the view, mechanic?" "Yes, sir," Ravi replied softly. Mr. Verma leaned on the railing beside him. "Don't take things so seriously, Yar. People joke around. You know how parties are." Ravi nodded, forcing a smile. "Of course, sir." "Anyway," Mr. Verma continued, "you should be proud. You're a hard worker. Not everyone can fix machines like you do." "Thank you, sir." Mr. Verma patted his shoulder. "Good man. You'll do well in life. Now come inside, have some food." Ravi followed him quietly, though his appetite was gone. He stood near the buffet, holding an empty plate, staring at the variety of dishes. The same people who had laughed earlier passed by, too busy enjoying themselves to notice him now. He ate a little, thanked Mr. Verma once more, and slipped out unnoticed. Outside, the night was peaceful. The hotel lights faded behind him as he walked toward the bus stop. Each step felt heavier than the last. He thought of the laughter, the stares, the way his job had been turned into entertainment. But deep down, something else began to stir, a small spark of resolve. He looked up at the sky, where the stars blinked faintly through the city haze. "One day," he whispered to himself, "they'll remember me for more than my dirty hands." He didn't know how or when, but he knew he would find a way. As the bus arrived and he climbed aboard, he looked at his reflection in the window. Tired eyes, rough hands, but a quiet fire burning within. He smiled faintly. The world might laugh at him now, but his story had only just begun. That night, while others slept peacefully in their fine homes, Ravi sat on his small bed, staring at the ceiling. The humiliation still echoed in his mind, but it didn't crush him. It shaped him. It became the seed of something greater, a promise to himself that no amount of laughter could ever erase. That night changed something inside Ravi. When he came home from the party, he didn't talk much. His mother asked how it went, and he just smiled faintly, saying, "It was good, Ma, the food was nice." She believed him, of course. She had always believed in him. But deep down, he knew that the truth was heavier than he wanted to admit. He couldn't sleep that night. He kept replaying every laugh, every smirk, every word that had cut a little too deep. He wasn't angry, and not exactly. It was more like a slow burn inside him, the kind that doesn't fade with time but grows until it turns into something else. He got up from bed, sat at his small wooden desk, and looked at his hands. They were rough, covered with small scars and traces of oil that never fully washed off. Most people only saw dirt, but to him, they were proof of his honesty, his struggle, his life, he whispered softly. "One day, these hands will build something no one can laugh at." The next morning, Ravi went to work early. His garage was small, just a tin-roofed shed with 2 platforms, a few old tools, and a faded sign that read Ravi Auto Works. The walls were cracked, and the floor was always covered with a thin layer of dust and grease. But to him, it was more than just a workplace. It was his world. His 2 assistants, Ramesh and Gopal, arrived soon after. Both were young boys from nearby villages who had come to learn the trade. They greeted him with smiles. "Paya, we fixed the scooter you told us about," Ramesh said proudly. "Good," Ravi replied. Always double-check the brakes before you send it off. Work began as usual, the sound of engines, tools clanking, the smell of oil in the air. But inside, Ravi's mind was somewhere else. Every time he picked up a wrench or fixed a motor, he thought about that party. Not the humiliation itself, but what it had awakened in him. He didn't want revenge. He wanted respect. He wanted to create something that made people see beyond grease-stained hands. That week, after closing the garage, he went to a small internet cafe near the bus stop. He had never been good with computers, but the cafe owner helped him find free online courses about automotive technology and business basics. Ravi spent hours watching videos, reading articles, and taking notes on everything he could understand. Fuel systems, new electric engines, marketing tips, customer service ideas. Every night after work he studied. His friends laughed when they saw him carrying books and papers home. "Are Ravi, since when did mechanics become engineers?" They teased, he only smiled. "Learning never hurts," he said. Months passed like this. His mother worried he was overworking himself, but he reassured her. "Ma, I'm just trying to build a better future," he said gently. He started saving every bit he could. He cut down on small luxuries. No cinema, no eating out, no new clothes. Whatever extra money he earned went straight into a small wooden box he kept hidden in his cupboard. His dream was slowly taking shape in his mind. A proper garage, one with real equipment, a clean waiting area, and space to train young boys who needed work. But dreams, as he knew well, never come easy. One rainy evening, the roof of his garage began to leak. Water dripped down right over a customer's car. Ravi and his assistant scrambled to cover it with plastic sheets, but it was a mess. The customer was furious. "Is this how you run a business?" he shouted. "You'll ruin my car." Ravi apologized repeatedly, even offering to service the car for free. But the man left angrily, vowing never to return. That night, when the rain kept pouring, Ravi sat on the floor of his garage, staring at the leaking roof. His savings weren't enough to repair it yet. For a moment he felt defeated. But then he remembered that night at the party and those faces, those laughs. He couldn't give up now. The next morning he went to the hardware market, bought tin sheets on credit, and repaired the roof himself. His hands bled a little from hammering the nails, but by evening the leak was gone. When his assistants saw it, they were amazed. "Bhaiya, you did all this alone?" Ravi smiled. "If we wait for others to fix our problems, we'll keep waiting forever." Word spread slowly about his dedication. Some customers returned, impressed by his honesty. One man said, "You may not have a big workshop, but your work is better than anyone else's." Those small words kept Ravi going. A few months later, an opportunity came that changed everything. A college professor came to Ravi's garage with an old scooter that nobody could fix. "If you can make this run, I'll be impressed," he said, half joking. Ravi worked on it for 3 days straight, experimenting with adjustments he had learned from his online lessons. On the 4th day, the engine started smoothly. The professor couldn't believe it. "You've got real talent," he said. "Ever thought of creating something new, not just repairing?" That idea stayed with Ravi long after the professor left. Creating something new. What if he could design a tool or a device that could help thousands of people like him? He began experimenting during his free time. Using scrap parts, he started building small prototypes. His goal was simple: to find a way to make engines more efficient for people who couldn't afford new vehicles. It wasn't easy. He failed many times. Tools broke, wires burned, and sometimes the whole garage filled with smoke. His assistants worried. "Bhaiya, maybe we should stop. This is wasting time." But Ravi shook his head. "Every failure teaches us something. We'll get it right." Slowly, with patience and persistence, he managed to create a small device that improved fuel efficiency for older vehicles. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. When he tested it on a customer's bike, the man came back a week later and said, "Bhaiya, the mileage has improved." "What did you do?" That small success felt like the biggest victory of Ravi's life. He refined the device further, made a few more, and offered them to regular customers. Soon, word spread. "There's a mechanic in the old town who can make your bike run like new." Business began to grow. More people came. Ravi saved more money and slowly expanded his workshop. He replaced old tools, added a proper hydraulic lift, and even painted the walls bright blue. For the first time, the place didn't just smell of oil, it smelled of hope. But he didn't forget where he came from. He started training poor boys from nearby slums who were looking for work. "Learn properly," he would tell them, "and you'll never have to beg anyone for respect." One evening when he closed the garage, he sat outside watching the sunset. The streets were noisy, filled with horns and dust, but his heart was quiet. He thought about that night at the party, how small he had felt, how invisible. Now he was building something real, something that would last longer than their laughter. Sometimes he would still see fancy cars drive by, heading to hotels or clubs. He no longer looked at them with envy. He looked at them as machines, and machines, no matter how expensive, always needed hands like his. One night, while he was locking up, a luxury car stopped near his garage. The driver lowered the window and called out, "Hey, are you Ravi?" "The mechanic?" "Yes," Ravi said, walking closer. "My boss said you're the only one who can fix this problem. The car keeps stopping suddenly. We've taken it to the company service center 3 times and no result." Ravi nodded calmly. "Leave it here. I'll check." When the car drove into his garage, he noticed something familiar about it. The same brand, the same number series. His heart skipped a beat. It was one of the cars he had seen at that party long ago. He ran his fingers gently along the hood and smiled to himself. Let's see what's wrong this time. That night he worked late with the sound of rain tapping on the roof. He didn't feel tired. He felt alive. Each spark from the tools reminded him how far he had come, from a man who was laughed at for his job, to someone whose skills spoke louder than any words could. As he wiped his hands clean, he looked around his little workshop. The walls, the tools, the smell, everything told a story of patience, pain and progress, he whispered again, just like he had months ago. "One day they'll remember me." And now, for the first time, it didn't sound like a dream. It sounded like a promise he was already keeping. Time moved quickly after that night when Ravi repaired the luxury car. The word about his work spread faster than he ever imagined. People from nearby towns started coming to his garage, not just for repairs, but also to see the man who could fix what even company engineers failed to handle. But with success came new challenges. The small shed that had once been enough for 2 bikes and a car now looked too cramped. There were days when customers waited outside in a line, honking and complaining about the delay. Ravi worked from sunrise to sunset, often skipping meals, and still couldn't keep up with the demand. One morning, while tightening a bolt under a car, he felt a sudden pain shoot through his back. He winced, got up slowly, and took a deep breath. His assistants noticed. "Paya, please take rest," Ramesh said. "You've been working nonstop for days." Ravi smiled faintly. Rest is for people who have finished their dreams, not for those still chasing them. But deep inside, he knew he couldn't go on like this forever. He needed to grow, not just work harder, but smarter. That evening, after closing the garage, he walked to a nearby tea stall. He sat quietly, sipping his tea, watching people pass by. Life outside the garage felt strange, slower somehow. As he looked at the busy street, a thought crossed his mind. What if he could open a second workshop? Maybe one that had proper equipment, better space, and trained people. It would not only help him, but also create jobs for others like him who had no opportunities. The idea excited him, but fear followed quickly. Money was the biggest problem. He had saved some, but it was nowhere near enough to start a new branch. He needed a loan. The next day, he went to a bank. The air inside smelled of perfume and polished floors. The man at the counter looked at him curiously. "Yes, what do you need?" Ravi explained his plan carefully, expanding his garage, hiring more people, and introducing his new fuel-saving device on a larger scale. The banker listened half-heartedly and then asked, "Do you have collateral? Property papers?" Ravi hesitated. "No, sir. Just my garage and my savings." The man shook his head. "That won't be enough. Come back when you have something to offer as security." Walking out of the bank that day felt worse than any rejection he'd ever faced. But unlike before, he didn't let it break him. He went back to his garage, sat on a stool, and thought quietly for a long time. If no one would invest in him, he would invest in himself. Over the next year, Ravi worked harder than ever. He took on more jobs, sometimes repairing vehicles late into the night. He saved every rupee, cut down on every unnecessary expense, and even sold his old scooter to add to his savings. Slowly, painfully, the money began to grow. His mother often worried. "You're pushing yourself too hard, Beta. Life is more than work, he would smile and say.
Ma, one day this work will change everything. Finally.
After nearly 2 years of saving and planning, he found a small piece of land at the edge of the town, dusty and empty but with potential. He borrowed a little money from a friend and began building his new workshop. He designed it himself: wider space, clean floors, a small office area, and a training corner for young mechanics. When the construction finished, he stood in front of the building, his name painted neatly on the board, Ravi Auto Care and Training Center. His eyes filled with tears. It wasn't a palace, but it was his dream made real. The new workshop quickly became popular. Customers loved that the place was clean, well managed, and the service was honest. But more than the customers, Ravi focused on his trainees. He taught them not just how to fix engines, but also how to treat people with respect. Remember, he would tell them, people may forget what you repaired, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. The young boys listened carefully. Many of them had come from poor backgrounds, just like he once did. For them, the workshop was not just a job, it was hope. Over time, Ravi's small invention, the fuel-saving device, caught attention too. A local newspaper published an article about it. The headline read, "Small-town mechanic creates device that saves fuel for common people." The article spread like wildfire. Reporters came, photos were taken, and suddenly, Ravi became a name people recognized. He didn't care much for fame, but what made him happiest was seeing his mother's eyes fill with pride when neighbors mentioned his name. But even with success, challenges never stopped. There were days when new mechanics made mistakes, customers complained, and competitors tried to spread rumors about his business. Some said his device was fake, others said he was lucky, not skilled. Ravi never argued. He let his work speak. Every satisfied customer, every repaired vehicle was his answer to their doubts. Then came a day that would test everything he had built. One afternoon, a man drove in with an expensive car. He was in a hurry, clearly impatient. "I've been to 3 service centers," the man said angrily. "No one can fix this." "Let's see if you can." Ravi looked at the engine carefully. It was a complex problem, but he didn't panic. He worked quietly, checking each part step by step. Hours passed. The man grew restless. "Can you fix it or not?" he demanded. Ravi looked up calmly. "Yes, sir. But I need time. Machines don't respond to shouting." By evening, the car started perfectly. The man was shocked. "How did you do that?" Ravi smiled. "Machines are like people, sir. You just have to listen carefully." The man left quietly but returned a few days later. This time not as a customer, but with an offer. "I'm part of a company that manufactures auto parts. We could use someone like you, someone who understands real problems. Would you be interested in working with us?" Ravi was surprised.
He had never imagined something like this.
But after thinking for a few days, he politely declined. "Thank you, sir. But I'm already working on something bigger, helping people like me stand on their own feet." The man smiled in admiration. "Then I wish you all the best. People like you are rare." After he left, Ravi sat for a long time in his office thinking about how far he had come, from being the man laughed at in a party, to someone respected even by big companies. It felt surreal. But he knew his journey was far from over. As his business grew, he started organizing small community workshops to teach basic vehicle maintenance. He didn't charge for it. For him, knowledge was something to be shared, not sold. People from nearby villages came with their old bikes and autos, eager to learn. Seeing their eager faces reminded Ravi of his younger self, the man who once stood in a corner at a fancy party, feeling invisible. He realized something that day. He had finally become the kind of person he used to look up to, not because of money or fame, but because of courage and consistency. One evening, as he was closing the shop, a fancy car stopped nearby. The door opened and a familiar voice called out, "Ravi, is that you?" He turned around. It was Mr. Verma, the same man who had once invited him to that party. His hair was grayer now, his voice slower. He smiled awkwardly. "I heard your name everywhere." "You've done well, my friend." Ravi nodded politely. "Thank you, sir. How can I help you?" Verma hesitated for a moment, then said, "My car broke down on the highway. Can you take a look?" Ravi walked over, examined the car, and began working. Verma stood silently watching. The same hands that were once mocked were now moving with confidence and precision. Within minutes, the car started again. Verma looked genuinely impressed. "You've become a master, Ravi. I'm proud of you." Ravi smiled, wiping his hands with a cloth. "I just kept doing my work, sir. That's all." As Verma drove away, Ravi watched the car disappear into the distance. He didn't feel pride or revenge, only peace. When he turned around, his trainees were standing behind him, smiling. "Bhaiya, that was the man who insulted you, right?" one of them asked. Ravi nodded slowly. "Yes, but you see, life has its own way of teaching lessons. We don't need to answer with words. Our work will do it for us." The boy smiled, nodding. And as the night grew quiet, Ravi looked up at the sky. The same sky that had once witnessed his humiliation, now shining softly over his success, he whispered almost to himself, "This is only the beginning." The sun was setting over the town, painting the streets in shades of orange and gold. Ravi stood outside his workshop, wiping his hands on a piece of cloth, watching the last few customers drive away. Business had been good, better than ever actually, but his mind was elsewhere. Lately he had been thinking about expanding again. His invention, the small fuel-saving device, had started attracting attention beyond his town. Mechanics from nearby districts called him to ask how it worked. Some even wanted to learn how to make it. He felt proud but also thoughtful. He didn't want to keep it to himself. He wanted to share it so that more people like him could earn better and live with dignity. That night, he sat on his small office chair long after everyone had gone home. The sound of insects filled the air and a dim bulb flickered above him. He took out a notebook and began writing ideas. "Create training centers," he wrote. "Teach poor mechanics for free. Help them open their own garages." The more he wrote, the more excited he became. He imagined a network of honest, skilled workers who treated customers with respect and fixed vehicles at fair prices. A chain of workshops where no one would be mocked for their dirty clothes or rough hands. But like every big dream, it needed money, support, and a plan. The next morning, he shared his idea with his team. They listened carefully, their eyes wide with excitement and concern. "Bhaiya, it sounds great," Ramesh said, "but it will take a lot of money." "How will we do it?" Ravi smiled. "Step by step, like everything else. When we started, we didn't even have a proper roof. But we built this, didn't we?" They all nodded. His words gave them courage. Over the next few months, Ravi worked harder than ever. He started reaching out to people, suppliers, community leaders, and even schools, to talk about his idea. Some ignored him. Others promised to think about it, but a few believed in him. Slowly, his plan began to take shape. One evening, as he was closing the garage, a familiar luxury car stopped near the gate. It was shiny, elegant, and clearly expensive. A driver stepped out and said, "Sir, my boss needs urgent help." The car broke down on the highway. Ravi looked up and asked, "Where is it?" "Just a few kilometers away," the driver said. "He asked me to bring you." No one else could fix it. Without hesitation, Ravi picked up his toolbox, locked the workshop, and went with him. The car stopped near a wide road where another luxury vehicle was parked. The man standing beside it looked familiar, neatly dressed, confident, surrounded by people. When Ravi came closer, his heart skipped a beat. It was Mr. Verma, the same man who had once invited him to that party years ago. The memories flashed before his eyes, the laughter, the humiliation, the long night of silence afterward. But he quickly pushed those thoughts aside. This wasn't the same Ravi. "Ravi," Verma said in surprise. "You're still fixing cars?" Ravi smiled gently. "Yes, sir." "And I hear your car needs fixing." Verma looked embarrassed. "Yes, it suddenly stopped in the middle of the road. We tried everything. Even the company technicians couldn't figure it out." Ravi opened the bonnet, leaned over, and began inspecting. The others watched silently. His hands moved with calm confidence, checking wires, listening to sounds, feeling the vibrations. After about 20 minutes, he tightened a small part and stepped back. "Try now," he said. Verma turned the key and the engine roared back to life. The crowd gasped, clapping softly. Verma's face changed from worry to relief to amazement. "How did you do that?" he asked. Ravi smiled faintly. "Machines talk, sir. You just have to know how to listen." Verma got out of the car, shaking his head in disbelief. "I can't believe this. I called 3 engineers and none of them could fix it." "You did it in minutes." Ravi said nothing. He just wiped his hands and packed his tools. Please, Verma said, come with me. I want to talk. They drove back to the city in silence. Ravi sat quietly in the back seat, looking out at the bright lights and tall buildings. They stopped at a hotel, a familiar one. It was the same place where the party had happened all those years ago. Inside, things hadn't changed much. The chandeliers still sparkled and the air still smelled of money and perfume. But this time Ravi didn't feel small. Verma led him to a private lounge. Ravi, he said seriously, I owe you an apology. Years ago at my birthday party I said things I shouldn't have. I made fun of you. That was wrong. Ravi looked at him quietly. It's all right, sir. People don't always understand others' struggles. I don't hold any anger. Verma nodded, grateful. You've done incredibly well. Everyone talks about your work. You've built something honest, something that matters. Thank you, sir, Ravi said. Verma leaned forward. I want to help you expand. I have contacts, investors. We could open branches across the state. You handle the work and I'll handle the business side. Ravi paused for a moment. He had dreamed of expansion, yes, but this offer made him think deeply. Was this the right way? He finally said, I appreciate your offer, sir, but I don't want to build something just for money. I want to build something for people, those who never get a chance. If you want to help, let's open a center together that trains poor youth. No fees, no conditions, just an opportunity. Verma looked at him in surprise, then slowly smiled. You've changed, Ravi. You're not just a mechanic anymore, like you're a visionary. A few months later, with Verma's support and Ravi's planning, the Ravi Skill Development Center was born. It was a simple place, clean rooms, basic tools, and a board that read, Learn with dignity, work with honesty. Boys from different towns came to learn. Some couldn't even afford bus fare. But Ravi made sure no one was turned away. He taught them with patience, sharing everything he knew. The joy on their faces reminded him of his own younger days, standing in his small garage full of dreams. As the center grew, local media covered it. Reporters visited, cameras rolled, and interviews were taken. When someone asked him, What inspired you to do this? He smiled and said, Once upon a time I was laughed at for what I do. Today I laugh with joy when I see others find respect in the same work. The story spread everywhere. People admired his humility and strength. Government officials even visited the center and promised grants for more training facilities. One day, while he was teaching a group of students how to open an engine, a boy asked, Sir, do you ever feel angry about how people treated you before? Ravi smiled gently. No. If they hadn't laughed at me, I might have never tried so hard. Sometimes pain becomes the reason you rise higher. The boys nodded silently. They understood. As months passed, Ravi's business continued to grow. His workshops became known for quality and honesty. More importantly, hundreds of young people got jobs and started their own garages. Following the values he taught them, his mother, now older and frail, often sat by the window, smiling as she watched him leave for work. I told you, Beta, she would say. Your hands are a blessing. You just had to believe it. He would touch her feet before leaving, replying softly, You were the first one who did. Years later, Ravi was invited to a big event in the city, an award ceremony for innovators and entrepreneurs. The hall was filled with influential people, businessmen and politicians. When his name was announced, the audience clapped loudly as he walked onto the stage. The host handed him a microphone. Ravi, you've inspired thousands. What's the secret behind your success? He paused for a moment, looking at the crowd. Many faces reminded him of that first party years ago. He smiled and said, The secret is simple. Never let anyone make you feel small for being honest. Respect your work no matter what it is. The world may not see your value right away, but one day they will. The room went silent for a moment, and then applause filled the hall. Some even stood up, clapping with admiration. As he stepped down from the stage, Verma came to greet him, eyes shining with pride. You were right, Ravi, he said. People will never forget what you've achieved. Ravi smiled humbly. I didn't achieve it alone, sir. Every person who once looked down on me, they all played a part. They made me stronger. Outside, the night breeze was cool. He looked up at the stars just as he had done years ago, when he'd been walking home from that humiliating party. Back then, he had promised himself that one day, the same world that mocked him would respect him. And now, standing under the same sky, he whispered softly, Promise kept. Years passed and the world around Ravi changed faster than ever. Big buildings rose where old houses once stood, new cars filled the roads, and machines became smarter. But one thing stayed the same: Ravi's workshop. It still stood in the same place where everything had started. Only now it looked very different. The dusty shed had turned into a large, clean space with shining tools, new machines, and young faces working eagerly. The nameplate outside read, Ravi Motors, honest work, honest heart. Every morning Ravi still arrived early, just as he had done years ago. He liked watching the sunrise over the street, hearing the sound of engines starting one by one. The smell of oil and metal still brought him peace. It reminded him where he came from and what he had built with his own hands. That morning he walked around the workshop as his team got ready for the day. Ramesh, his oldest helper, was now a senior supervisor. The younger boys respected him and often said, "Paya, if we can be half as skilled as you, we'll be happy." Ravi smiled at the sight. It wasn't just a workplace anymore. It was a family. After breakfast, he sat in his small office. On the wall behind him hung photographs, pictures from the award ceremony, the first day of his training center, and even a framed copy of a newspaper that had once printed his story with the headline, "The Mechanic Who Changed Lives." He often looked at those photos and thought about how far he had come. But that morning he wasn't thinking about his success. His mind was on something else, the future. He had been planning something for months, a big step, maybe his last big project. He wanted to build a foundation that would continue his work long after he was gone, a trust that would train poor youth in every part of the country. He had the money, the land, and the team. All he needed now was to finalize the paperwork and start the process. That afternoon he met with his lawyer and discussed the details. The lawyer, an old friend by now, looked at him and said, "Ravi Pai, this is a noble thing you're doing, but you'll need someone to manage it in the future. Have you thought about that?" Ravi smiled softly. "Yes, I've been thinking of someone." He didn't say who, but in his heart he already knew. Later that week he visited one of his training centers in another town. As he walked through the classrooms, he saw dozens of young students learning with focus and excitement. Some were welding, some repairing engines, and others learning customer service. Their faces reminded him of his own younger self, hungry to learn, desperate for a chance. He stopped by a boy who was working quietly in the corner. The boy looked up shyly and greeted him. "Good morning, sir." "What's your name?" Ravi asked. "Manu, sir," the boy replied. "I came from a small village. I want to open my own workshop one day." Ravi smiled warmly. "You will, Manu, and when you do, don't forget to teach someone else like you." The boy nodded with a wide smile. Those simple words lit up his eyes. As Ravi walked out, he felt a wave of peace. This was his real wealth. Not the cars, not the fame, but the smiles he saw in the eyes of those who believed in him. A few weeks later, he got an invitation. It was for a business event in the city, a gathering of entrepreneurs, innovators, and leaders. The letter said they were honoring him with a Lifetime Achievement Award. He didn't care much about awards anymore, but he accepted. He knew that attending such events could bring attention to his foundation and inspire others to support it. The evening of the event, he arrived at the grand hall dressed simply, a clean white shirt, dark trousers, and his old wristwatch that had stopped working years ago but still stayed on his wrist as a reminder of where he started. As he entered, people turned to greet him. Some whispered, some came forward to shake his hand. They all knew his story now. The man who was once mocked had become a legend in his field. During the ceremony, several speakers praised him. One said, "Ravi is proof that greatness doesn't come from wealth or power, but from perseverance and heart." When his name was called, he walked to the stage calmly. The audience stood up and clapped for him. The applause was long and heartfelt. He took the microphone and looked around. The lights were bright, and for a moment he could barely see the crowd. But he didn't need to. He already knew what he wanted to say. "Thank you for this honor," he began. "When I started my journey, I had nothing but a small toolbox and a lot of dreams. I was laughed at, insulted, and told that a poor man could never change his fate. But I learned something very important. The world only respects you after you respect yourself." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I never fought anyone," he continued. "I just worked hard and stayed honest. My hands, which people once mocked for being dirty, built my life, and today they are clean because they never did wrong." The audience fell silent. His words touched every heart in the room. He smiled gently. "If I have achieved anything, it's because I believed in work. Honest, simple work. I want every young person to remember this. Your dreams are not small just because your pockets are. Your value doesn't come from what you wear or where you live, but from how much effort you give." When he finished, the hall erupted in applause. Many had tears in their eyes.